Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our presentation this afternoon. Just making sure that if you guys there in the audience can hear me okay, just type a message in, let me know that you can hear me okay, and we'll jump right into the slide deck. Excellent, thank you, Brian. All right, so let me pull up the slide deck and jump right into that. Right. So during our annual conference here in Lexington, we gave a presentation on cybersecurity and how the regulations impact dealers. And I'm looking for my audio control here to get rid of my camera on the side. One second. Sorry about that, fellas, gals. My Zoom controls went a little wonky here on me for just a second. Lost the camera control, but anyway, so we'll move along on that. And so, a lot of feedback after the conference was asking about, what to do next and stuff. And I know a lot of people weren't able to make the conference since it was here in Lexington. And so we went to back to BJ and had some discussions and decided we would do it again. And so here we are, and jump right into it. So my name is Russ Hensley, and I've got 24 years of IT experience. One of the things that we do is we handle IT for banks, and as the managed services or managed security provider inside of the bank itself. And it has led into us having a pretty good relationship with the banks and some of the dealers that you guys have in your member organization. And so that's why I was asked to give the presentation back in May. And some fun stuff, not just an IT nerd, security guy. I'm also a commercial rated airplane pilot and fly helicopters and stuff like that. That's a helipad I painted at my house the day before your guys' presentation here in Lexington. So one of the things that we want to do in this little time we've got together is to challenge you all to think like a banker. And the reason I want to do that is to have you all understand what the banks may be looking for from the dealers, from you all, as we have some more people join us here too, so they're all coming in. So we'll wait on the others jumping in here. And so, now that the rest of everyone here is back in the room. So one of the challenges in this presentation is to have you all think like a banker, specifically someone who may be looking at your dealer company to understand what your security posture is and understand the rationale behind how they are looking at you all. And so from that perspective, one of the things that the banks are looking at is obviously risk management. And from their standpoint, they're looking at protecting their customer information. They're looking at bank safety and soundness for bad loans and stuff like that. And piece of that is, the network and IT security. And so from their standpoint, that IT steering committee is going to be the group that's going to be looking at your dealer program. And I'll explain why they're looking at that as well. So, the members of the IT steering committee typically are CEOs, COOs, the Chief Information Security Officer, of the bank. And we got one more jumping in. So I had to let one more person in there. So back to this share. Well, back to that window. Okay, so the group in an IT committee, what they're looking for is to manage risk. And so many of you may not know this, but banks are audited, at least here in Kentucky and across the nation, about every 18 months by different groups. The FDIC auditors come in every 3 years. Their purpose is to set the risk rating for the bank. In other words, what's the liability that the bank may assume in their insurance, and how much money would the FDIC insure, and would the board of that bank need to take on additional risk themselves in this score. And so part of the audit process is to set that risk score for the FDIC. The FDIC's other companion is the state examiners, and they're looking at, the operation of the bank, is how it goes, for state and local laws and stuff like that, then depending where the bank's at. And then they have white hat auditors are coming in, and that's, some random cycle in that every 3 years that, they're paid contractors like us. They're coming through and looking at the bank and saying, okay, you guys are okay or not. And giving them feedback before the next audit comes up. So the guidance, so they make this up, right? So these bank IT steering committees, what are they looking at when it comes to looking at your dealer, your company that's working in this bank environment? Do they have a source where this is coming from? And this is kind of the meat and potatoes of where we're headed in this conversation. And what do the examiners, expect when they're in, looking at you? So there's very clear guidance. If we look at, this is the FFIEC website. And if you look at the lower right-hand corner, there's an IT handbook info base, which if you click in that, you'll see these pages, specifically the information security, the outsourcing technology services, and supervision of technology service providers, which is, everybody on the call. If you're delivering any kind of service like a ITM, security monitoring system, a call center, contact center for phone support, fall in one of those 3 categories, and you become part of the scrutiny that these auditors are going to be looking for. So example, just right straight out of their language, IT it's just not us computer guys, right? It's loan processing, deposit processing, security monitoring, testing, development, network operations, help desk operations of all kinds. These all fall in that bucket. And so the banks have very direct guidance to come look at the vendors that are delivering these services. That's the short version of that slide deck. And then what are they looking for? They're looking for third-party service providers, which is all of us on this call. We're all unless you're a bank, you're a third-party service provider to the bank. And it also goes into the IT handbook, outsourcing technology service booklet for, more stuff. So what are they looking at? The banks internally, this is what they're going to be building their internal protocols and documents to look like. Governance of the Information Security Program. You can see it there. Security culture, policies and procedures, supply chain is a key word to look at. Business continuity considerations, threat monitoring, threat identification. These are the things that in these community and regional banks, they're looking at this every day. They're working with companies like mine to make sure that they're doing this internally. So when it comes to us and you all, they're looking for the same thing from you. And here's why. The supply chain. We're all part of the supply chain. You know, you guys are delivering products and services into the banks. And so if you go Google, you know, banking supply chain hacks, you know, here's an article from last September, 1,318% increase in ransomware attacks in 2021. Most common thing that every banker and everybody on this call probably should be thinking about is how to avoid having ransomware infiltrate your network. And how do you do that? Well, this is how. Part of it is the policies, procedures, the diligence to look through those and put in systems and procedures to make sure that you're going to control that. And so supply chain hacks are, you know, I think the gas pipeline last year where they shut the pipeline down is a supply chain hack. So what does that mean for us, meaning everybody on the call? So you're going to be part of that vendor review process that the IT committee and the banks are going to be going through. It is subjective and it is arbitrary. You may or may not be pulled up in these discussions because someone thinks you don't hit a risk score correctly. All right. So if you're not critical, you may not be put in that bucket so deeply, but some, you know, other bank may look at the same vendor and say, well, you guys are business critical. Commonly what I see in the banks that we're dealing with is it transitioned from banking companies that were traditionally just handling securities and door locks and stuff like that. And they've migrated into doing other things, like they're now delivering ITMs and monitoring systems inside the banks, you know, alarm systems, and they're walking into the banks and they're, you know, at some point they're interfacing with the bank's network. They're bringing their laptop into the bank. They're connecting to the bank's network to set IP addresses or whatever. And now you just became a critical vendor because you connect your gear to the bank's network that you brought in the door. So, good example. So we are kind of suggesting to everyone in this space that you really should be preparing for these banks to transition you into the critical vendor. Be prepared to have evidences, cybersecurity controls, policies, and procedures, you know, to deliver, you know, a stack of documents basically electronically to the bank, showing them that you're keeping your cyber hygiene up to date and have the policies and procedures in place. It's not just having a checkbox saying, hey, I've got Trend Micro installed, I've got Norton Antivirus installed. Those days are well behind us after the last couple of years with all the ransomware. So what do you do to fix that? So the federal government and state, they've kind of came up with these tools. When I say tools, they're written frameworks, documents, and I'll show you an example here in a second. Even the FFIEC refers back to, in the end of their document, there's a cross-reference matrix that you can use to say, you know, I'm using the right tools. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a government agency. They do all kinds of things with standards and technology. And one of the things that they've done for a long time is produce a series of documents called the NIST 800 series, which refers to security practices for all kinds of things, servers, door locks, all kinds of things. And a lot of people in the past thought that those policies and procedures were overly burdensome. And so they came out with a small, medium business version of this thing called the Cybersecurity Framework. And the 5 pillars of the Cybersecurity Framework are identify the data, protect the data, detect an intrusion, respond to the intrusion or event, and recover. So it doesn't have to be a hack. It doesn't have to be ransomware. I mean, it could be flood, tornado, fire, all these things that, you want to think about in protecting your systems to build in redundancies and business continuity for later to stay in business and service your customer. So if there's and it's free. So, you can go download it from the NIST website. You can Google NIST Cybersecurity Framework and all kinds of things will come up, but there's going to be a .gov site that's going to have that. And it's designed for all stakeholders. It's not a technical tool. It's a tool the business owner, manager, you should be involved in this. It's a check tool to use with your IT staff, with your security guys. It's not something you just hand to an IT guy and say, "Hey, go do this," and then walk away. It's like, your HR policies. Think of it that way. You want to know what's in those, just like you want to know what's in this document. And it's not a super technical document, it's a business document for the owner to be used with your IT staff. And so commonly what happens is the banks or whatever entity, your insurance company, if you have a cybersecurity insurance policy, will say, do you have a cybersecurity program in place? This is what they're talking about. They're talking about these documents. This is not what you would see to say it's SOC 1 compliant or SOC 2 type 2 compliant, but it will definitely put you in the beginning steps if you ever decide to have to go towards SOC type 1 or type 2. That is, kind of, I call it the baby steps. So here's an example of pages out of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. The identify section, it's broken down here. This is like one page, out of 25. Do you have a hardware inventory of all the gear that you own? Software inventory of software installed on that hardware? Do you have a security policy? Do you have people in your supply chain that you're asking these questions to that are bringing gear into your business? Things like, wireless networks and stuff like that. And so, kind of expand on that, not to dwell too deep, but this is a real high level, sample that. On the protect side, access controls, physical access is covered in the cybersecurity framework too. So, you guys are in security business, a lot of y'all installing security systems in banks. It's kind of like, cobblers or the shoe cobblers problems. We don't have any shoes for our children because we're too busy making shoes for everybody else. So here's one of those moments to stop and say, okay, are we doing this ourselves? Login monitoring, mobile device encryption, data at rest. How do you protect it? Is it encrypted inside the database? If a bad guy got in and they stole the whole system, could they read it? These tools cause pause for us to go and examine those things and then set the policies in place that protect you. Like, do you use multi-factor authentication on everything? There in protect AC-1. And so, do you have a Duo or a Google Authenticator or Authy or something like that, just to, log into Office 365. If you guys are using Office 365 and you're not using multi-factor authentication on that today, you really should be doing it tomorrow, because your guys' passwords and stuff exist in the dark web, and bad guys get a hold of those things and they just sit there and they just hit your domain and look for stuff. Common answer I get is, I don't have any banking data. We don't have HIPAA data. Why do we need to put this in protection in place other than the banks asking for it? If you have employee data and you have, workman's comp claims and employee stuff, you have HIPAA data, you have PCI, credit card routing numbers, you have all kinds of banking data inside your business. And then each state in the United States has their own consumer data protection law that is separate from the federal regulations. It's going to basically tell you to do the NIST CSF to make sure that you have diligence on your end, that you're protecting, your own employees' data and your customers' data. So at this point, shifted away from what the bank wants, but to what you should be doing as a good steward of your business's data. All right. as the owner implementing this, it can be just done annually once you have it turned on, and it really, you pull the documents out, sit down with your IT guys and go through it and say, are we doing this year or something changed? So you get a gap analysis out of it. The first year that you do it, it's probably a couple of weeks project, 6 weeks, expect that to kind of go through it. There's tools that exist that you can use to assist in doing the NIST CSF, not just the free PowerPoint or PDF versions. Examples of things you should be doing that the NIST CSF is going to review. These are like practical kind of things you should be doing. Multi-factor authentication. So when I say that, what I'm talking about is, if you log into a bank and it texts you a PIN, or you have the little Google Authenticator or Authy Authenticator app on your phone. RSA tokens used to be real common, where they had the random number generators, and every 60 seconds you got a new number. That's multi-factor authentication. You really should be doing that on anything in the cloud. You should right now be running a mental list, like, okay, what's in Google Apps, Office 365, QuickBooks, whatever hosted solution you have, gaining access to that, you really should have multi-factor turned on there. Something that goes missed, sometimes security awareness training. We use a company called KnowBe4. If you guys haven't heard of it, send me an email later. We'll explain that to you a little bit more, but it's an entire training program. We do phishing simulation. So we get your domain, we baseline your company, and basically send in fake emails that look like they're from Starbucks or UPS or FedEx, and see how many of your employees open them. And then we start a training regimen to educate them on, like, don't click the link, because that's, the major way that the bad guys are coming in, the threat actors are coming into your network to phish you and install ransomware that lays there for 6 months, and then one day it wakes up and encrypts everything on your network. So security awareness training. I know if you have a cybersecurity insurance policy for, these types of events, it's a checkbox, it's in there. Multi-factor is their number one checkbox. Security awareness training is their number two, and the formal program is right behind that. Encrypting laptops and servers is store sensitive data. Anything you guys have in the field, you should be running BitLocker. Encrypting those hard drives, so if they get stolen, then they're encrypted. Bad guys, the thief, they can't fire the notebook up and take the hard drive out of it, put it in another computer, circumvent your password that's on the machine, and read the hard drive. So if the hard drive is encrypted, you can't do that. If the hard drive is unencrypted and your laptop's stolen, I don't need your password to get into the laptop. I plug your hard drive into my laptop and just read it. Encrypt your hard drives. Patch management is more of a housekeeping task, audit, make sure that your operating systems on your Windows computers and Mac computers are up to date with current versions of, security patches and stuff like that, and getting a formal, ideally you want to have a formal report that shows where you're at in that, and I'll show you an example of that. And then really having 24/7 monitoring of the laptop if someone has had something installed on it. We call that a security operations center, a SOC. You guys, probably some of you will run a SOC at your own business for your customers. For those of you that don't, if you had ransomware installed at 10 o'clock at night and you don't have that monitored, then by the time that you kind of look at the little software that's on your computer and it realizes that something's bad on there, it's too late. You carried it back into work the next day and infected your business network or your customer's network, or worst case, the machine's encrypted. And the two of these I have highlighted yellow, multi-factor and on-site and off-site backups. If you've never seen ransomware, had a ransomware event, the key thing to take away is that most of the time, the only recovery from a strong ransomware attack is to have everything backed up off-site, out of your building, disconnected from that network that's clean, and you basically reload everything. It's like a tornado going through the business. So on-site's good, off-site's great. 3 copies is even better. So having one that's, off-site or air-gapped on-site, so it's not connected to your network somehow, and you've got it just detached. So if some ransomware event happened, or somebody was doing something nefarious in your network, bad employee or next door neighbor or whatever, they can't gain access to that data that's air-gapped. So just know in ransomware, if you do not have an offsite backup, the ransomware is smart enough to sort out your on-site backups that are there and disable those and delete them in some cases. So it's scary stuff. We've dealt in the last couple of years probably about 75 different ransomware events. We're cleaning up for other companies, and some of our own firsthand that we've seen, and it's not nice. So multi-factor offsite backup, that's all I can say on that slide deck. That's the main thing. Desktop patch management is a quick example of a report. Your managed service provider, your security service provider, your IT staff should be able to produce through tools that are installed on computers, saying, here's the machines, they're up to date, they're not updated, their patches are blacklisted, we've not deployed them. This is a real simple example of a report. And so kind of coming to the end of our time here, keep us on track for a few minutes, for a little Q&A maybe. So why are we doing this again? And besides the fact that banks expect it, if you should be doing it for yourself to protect yourself, because if you're the source of the attack, then they're going to subrogate or come back to you to help cover their claim. So if your staff walks into a business and it's traced back to you that you've infected the network, you're on the hook. And you'll find that real quickly. You may be great friends, but you're on the hook. So and in the last couple of years, you've heard some of these attacks coming on the 6 o'clock news, so everybody's kind of up to snuff what these are. SolarWinds was beginning in 2020, Kaseya 2021, the pipeline attack, those are very out there. So it's not something that's just being talked about in these IT steering committees. It's kind of almost in the common vernacular of conversation every day, that these are out there. If you use computers in your business, and they're really good at going back and figuring out where the source of the risk is. So that's, do it for yourself, but know the banks are going to start to expect it. This is some of the stuff that we do. We don't sell cybersecurity insurance, but we walk people through understanding what the questionnaires mean and stuff like that. We do sell managed services, NOC, SOC, all that stuff. I'm not going to talk about the tools today in this session, but this is the background that we come from as we deliver these services and into dealers, members like you guys, and into the banks. So it's something that we're very, very versed on. So with that, that's the last slide deck. Question time is here. I'm going to drop the share. And I think I can, you all can unmute yourselves if you have any questions, and we'll take a few minutes here for question time. No questions. No one's got any questions.
Hi, yes, is the slide deck available for us by any chance?
Yes, I will get the slide deck emailed to you all. I'll send a link out to that. So,
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
yeah. Do you see the need? Somebody's wrote a message. Do you see the need for locks in which can be remote managed? The need, that's more from our standpoint. I don't get into, like, I think what the banks might see as a need. I like a lot of things remote managed, like power outlets that you can turn on and off, but they also open a threat, as you all would think, well, now I can turn the remote off on power remotely too. So I would say use those very specifically based on the need that you would have. So, because they would come up in a vulnerability threat. See, BJ's on here with us. BJ, you have any questions, comments?
Well, as had happened when we saw this live, I'm terrified. This is absolutely terrifying. And I guess I set up two-factor identification on everything, but I didn't think about encrypting a hard drive, and I travel a lot, and I did not catch the name of the encryption that you like for the hard drive.
So BitLocker is built into Windows.
Okay. Oh, it is. Okay.
And the Macs, if you have a Mac, they also have their own built-in encryption that you can. It has to be enabled. It's not enabled by default. You have to turn them on.
Okay. All right. And how do you feel about something like Norton? Is it just surface level useless? Or, I mean, I know you're going into deeper stuff than that, but it's just me here. I don't have an IT department. And I'm assuming some of the people on the call are in the same boat. What is antivirus doing for us? I've got AppGuard for the ransomware protection. I'm just sitting here terrified.
Yeah, so Norton's not on my list of ones I use. Windows, actually Microsoft, if you have Office 365,
I do.
they have a product that used to be terrible called Windows Defender, and I hope Microsoft is listening because it's actually pretty good now. And so Windows Defender, if you have nothing else, I would enable that. You can increase the Office subscription if there's a free one, but then there's another one that's above that you can go to. What we use for our banking customers and for our own purposes is a tool called SentinelOne, and it's more of one of the advanced, what they call endpoint detection response tools, and Defender is in that kind of same bucket now. It's been surprisingly good, and Microsoft and company used to get such a bad rap with security that they really pivoted on the Windows Defender tool. I used to literally just laugh when people say I run Defender. I'm like, that's not even antivirus.
Yeah. Yeah, the last person that I had in as an IT support person was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and that was the reaction to Windows Defender. It was like, why bother?
Yeah, they've completely pivoted on that, and it's in the case of nothing, that's better, but in the other end, and I don't know that you can buy, like, we offer onesie twosie pieces of SentinelOne to our customers because you almost have to buy it. Like SentinelOne comes if you buy like 1,000 pieces. Like you have to have a subscription of 1,000 to even get in their bucket. We call me later or something. We can talk about even SentinelOne if you want to talk about that. But that's it is ironclad. I've not seen anything get past SentinelOne that, if it was configured correctly, it will stop it. And CrowdStrike is another one, and Carbon Black is a third one. Those are the three. If we go into corporate environments, we are deploying Carbon Black, SentinelOne, and CrowdStrike.
Okay, okay.
Oh.
Thank you. I mean, we got a hand up. So
Yeah, I see Cody there. Go, Cody.
Good afternoon. I actually have two questions. The FIEC Gov site, could you show where you
Oh, yeah.
where explicitly you went to those guideline books, or whatever there were? I was taking notes and I can't seem to find it again.
Yeah, so it's FFIEC.gov.
And then you click on IT handbook info base, and then that's where I got lost and can't find what
okay.
you were referring to.
10.4. Let me go. I'm looking at that screen here right now. Down at the bottom, if you click at the very bottom, it's kind of wonky. You have to scroll to the very bottom of the page and it says select multiple IT booklets to download now.
Okay.
If you click on the word multiple, it'll give you the whole list.
Okay. Awesome. That's what I was looking for.
It's wonky. I mean,
Okay. So my second question, I ended up being given this by the owners of my companies. They came and saw you at the Lexington convention. And the reason they wanted me to attend this and kind of get some guidebooks to work off of is we install surveillance systems and alarm systems and ITMs exclusively for banks. That's what our company does.
okay.
And recently, within the last quarter, we've gotten about 3 of these audit reports for vendors that you're specifically referring to, just asking us what standards we meet, what does that look like? What would be the best place to kind of see where they're getting those from, to kind of use that as a guidebook as well, to know what banks are looking for and what those audit reports are going to entail, I guess is my question.
Yeah. Okay. So the craft there is going to be the banks are going to distill down that FFIEC list.
Okay.
You know, that's so that IT booklet is the audit list.
Okay.
So that's, you know, if I'm a bank examiner, I'm walking in with the FFIEC book, basically. Credit unions, you know, we have several credit union customers, and they never, like, I shouldn't say it this way. The banks were more worried about it than the credit unions until last year. And they're starting to do the same thing. They've actually now gone, oh, FFIEC, you know, it was almost like, it just means that's for banks. We're NCUA, who cares, you know? And so, but that's the mothership of what they're going to be and what they're looking for. You know, when they say, what standards do you follow? It's really going to fall into 2 buckets or 3. They're going to say, are you NIST 800 compliant? It's actually 800-171. Are you NIST CSF? Or are you some flavor of SOC compliance? And what you guys are doing, you're not running, you're installing, you're not running the monitoring of the ITMs, right?
Yeah, we're just installing them. The monitoring is done by the bank's internal IT.
Okay.
So it's really just being able to understand what they're looking for from us and how to have a conversation with them about these standards that they're trying to meet, because they're starting to ask us these questions and we don't know how to answer them, is essentially what we're looking for.
And that's literally basically why I was there in May, because what you guys are at, I mean, it's, you know, the group and BJ, they're like, what is this? Right. And so they're like, come talk to us. And so that cybersecurity framework. So if you go to Google NIST cybersecurity framework, it's going to take you to NIST.gov/cyber framework. And that document said it's a self attestation. So there's not really an external audit process to the CSF. You're going to say, I'm doing it. And you're just going to deliver, you know, some documents and we follow this CSF. I mean, it's
Okay.
on the SOC type 1 and type 2, you pay an external CPA firm to do the audit, and you do walk away with an audited process. And those can be between 17 to, $100,000 to kind of give you an idea just on the fees from the audit company. And that's not including like your internal, like you doing the work to prepare to give the auditor the, payload to let them go examine what you're doing. So, and like we can't even do SOC 1, SOC 2 audits, but we can kind of walk you through what it takes to get there, if that makes sense. So that's what they're looking for is in this CSF, and the reason they're looking for it is that FFEIC handbook.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem. Adam, Jordan, you had a question.
Hey, Russ, thanks. Yeah, the question is what are some of the different scanning tools that the financial institutions are using to scan their networks for vulnerabilities?
So when you look at that, a lot of these tools, they come down from an open source platform that was out there called, oh my gosh, I had a brain fart. I'll come back to the open source version. There's
Nmap, is that what you're referring to?
No, it's not. It's Nmap is what it does. It's
Tenable Nessus.
man, like I'm having like a security IT guy like brain fart around this Zoom call.
Russ, are you thinking Tenable Nessus?
Yes, Nessus. Yes, Nessus. Nessus is the tool that basically a lot of these platforms they're using some version of that, looking for the CVEs, the vulnerabilities, the exploits database. We use a product that we deploy in our networks from Rapid Fire Tools called Volscan, and it's a subscription-based license, so we can deploy one in to a business for like $20 a month, and it scans every month. I personally believe the way the audit process has been done prior to the last 12 years I've been involved with it, they look at like security as a snapshot of this week. That's not the way security works. So coming in and doing a scan and then them leaving and walking away is really kind of like, okay, we're good for like a month, because we all worked real hard to get the thing together for the month for the auditor to be there for 2 weeks, right? And so I've purposely hunted out some tools like the Rapid Fire Tools Volscan that they fire off every month, and they look at everything. They look at IP cameras, Linux stacks on those, control systems, time clocks, anything attached to the network. It's like sniffing around, looking at stuff. So I hope that's the Nessus is the most common one you'll find, because it has an open source version, and the commercial version I think is around $1,500 a year, and so a lot of times they'll use the free one for a couple of weeks and do the scans and then move on.
That's perfect. Thanks for that, Russ. Appreciate it.
Cool. Chris Xavier.
Hey, thanks, Russ. So we're in the middle of a SOC 2 audit now, or about to complete a SOC 2 audit now. My question is centered around, once you get a SOC 2 audit report, how guarded are you with providing that to banks and so forth? Or do you have any guidelines around how freely you distribute your SOC 2 report?
So I'll give you the answer that my data center gives to me as an example. They don't give it to me. So because that audit report, the actual output of that, I would argue is sequestered information that is describing security vulnerabilities that may have existed in your network at the time, right? There is a process at the end of that what we commonly see is the CPAs, they're issuing the SOC 2 the compliance report will say XYZ company has been audited and they're SOC 2 compliant. And that's about as all you get. If I walked into Flex Central right now, which is a massive data center company nationwide, that's who we use. We manage our co-location for our customers ourselves in 3 of their sites. And they're a tier 2 data center, and I do not have a copy of their SOC 2 report. they've got a website that's got, here's our HIPAA attestation and NIST 171. I mean, it's got all their reports, but it's actually the guts of what make that, it's off limits.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And it's an odd question because everybody's like, oh, I want to see your report. You can see we're audited. This is like, you don't need to see the sausage made. And so, all right. Brian, do you have another question?
Yeah, I think two follow-ups to the last two comments there. First on the SOC 2, I've seen organizations that will provide it upon written request, and also, provided that you have an NDA with that organization. And the other thing too is if I can't remember the exact terminology that the auditors use, but if there are no findings, then I don't see a risk in providing that to my vendors or my customers, right? Because it really shows, hey, I've been audited and I'm good. But if it does come back as I can't remember the terminology that they use, but if there are findings, then you have to start to think about, that business decision on whether I'm going to release this information, because it does provide all the sausage making and your dirty laundry is out there.
Right.
And then on the scanning, if banks and credit unions are using O365 and are in the Azure platform, they also have the TVM, the Threat Vulnerability Management, which comes with your subscriptions. It depends on how you're licensed there. And that will also utilize many different protocols to go out and scan your network and find. It does a really good job on all the Windows devices, but it will also find vulnerabilities on network equipment and other things that are there. So it may be something that you already are licensed for and don't have to pay an additional fee or cost. And it has, a dashboard that you can see where you're at and kind of provide you that reporting mechanism as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, and that goes back to the BJ comment. Like Microsoft has really pushed up their game on tools, and that's one. It's not a common one I see, but you're right. They do have that in there. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Give it one last call. Maybe I could think of anything else. It's 12 to 3 here in my time zone. You guys have got my email address, contacts, and everything, from the session here. If you have any questions, I'm free to answer anything. I promise not to do a sales pitch to you. I'm here to help and strategize through some of these things, because we just see so many of our customers that are on both sides of this. They don't understand, who to ask. Like on the banks, I actually sat in some of the IT steering committees as a member, because we're providing deep services for them, and we look at their supply chain, and I'll bring up companies like, hey, what about these guys? On the other hand, when this first started, one of the banks we were working with, they're like, do we need to ask the janitorial system for their SOC 2 compliant? I'm like, no. There's a cleanup guys. They're not going to have a SOC 2 certificate. They didn't understand it. Short version. If anything I can help you guys with, feel free to ping me, and we'll go from there. So with that, I'll let you guys get back to work, and we'll end the call here at 10 to 3.
Well, thank you. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing this with everybody. This is BJ. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, BJ. It's been great working with you guys.
All right. Thank you.
See y'all.